Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and Happy New Year! It is 2018. Since it is a new year, I thought I would go ahead and recap kind of my 2017 reading. So I'm going to do a best and worst list of the books I read this year, so a top 10 and a bottom 10. And then I'm also going to talk to you guys about my reading stats. So if you're only interested in the best and worst list, we are going to do that now, and then afterwards I'm going to do my stats, and I'll put a timestamp down below if for some reason you don't want to know the best and worst list and only want to know the stats. So let's get into it. If you've been following my blog or YouTube channel for a little while now, you'll know that I don't own books quite like a lot of other booktubers do. I don't buy them as frequently. I very heavily rely on my library. But with that being said, I do happen to own most of my top 10 books of the year, which is pretty exciting. So I either bought them after I read them. Did I buy any of them after I read them? No, I bought all of these before I read them. Rare. I mostly buy books after I've already read them and know that I want to own them for, letting friends borrow or just to have on my shelf or to reread. But typically I don't buy stuff before I read them. There's some special circumstances with a few of these, and I may or may not talk about that. We'll see. They're also going to not be ranked or in any particular order. I'm kind of doing them in the order that they were read throughout the year, because that's kind of how I went through my Goodreads list to figure out what I wanted to pick for my top and bottom 10. We're starting off with a graphic novel, actually, and I have been trying to get more into comics and graphic novels lately. I definitely want to do that more in 2018, but the first one is March by John Lewis. So this is a nonfiction. It is talking about the civil rights movement, and it is a really, really good look at that time period, and I actually think this would be really beneficial for maybe like middle grade, or maybe even a little bit younger than middle grade, if you want to teach them about this time period but not have it be so I don't know, it's just a little more kid-friendly maybe. It still talks about like what's bad about it, but it's not quite as brutal as possibly like a history book or a nonfiction memoir maybe, which this is kind of a memoir. It is a memoir because it is John Lewis' experience, but really recommend it. There are 3 in the series, and I own the first 2. I plan on reading the second one here very soon, and then I will probably have to go buy the third one. The second top book of the year is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. So I actually picked this up at a library sale, and I wanted to read it before the Netflix show came out, which I watched. I like the book a lot better. There's lots of discussions on it online. I didn't make my own video about it. I think, did the show come out before I started YouTube? I think it did. But I really, really loved the book. I thought it was a really cool like format because of the tapes that are done in it. So yeah, it was a good one. This is kind of a controversial book, so I totally understand why some people don't like it. I'm not saying you have to love this book just because I do, but I enjoyed it. Third on the list is Milk and Honey. This has been a very popular book since it came out. This was actually sent to me by a friend of mine, Jessie's Library, here on YouTube. I will link her channel down below. But this is a collection of poems, and I just thought it was excellent. I related to quite a bit of it, as it is written by a woman and talks a lot of her own experience growing up and adulthood and just sexuality type things, and I really, really liked it. She actually came out with a second book, I think this year, called The Sun and Her Flowers, which is on my TBR, so if you've read that, let me know. Let me know what you thought about it, because I am excited to get it and read it. Alright, next up is one that I don't actually own, however I plan on buying the whole series. This is the third book in a series, and it is A Conjuring of Light by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab has quickly become one of my favorite authors, and I've only read 3 books by her, which is the series, the Shades of Magic series. I ordered her collector's edition of the first book in the series, A Darker Shade of Magic, and it's so good, guys. If you like fantasies or any type of magical system type stories, you will love this series. I know I've raved about it before. Highly, highly recommend, and I instantly added like all of V.E. Schwab's, or Victoria Schwab, depending on if she's writing YA or adult. She goes by both names. And I added all of her books to my TBR after I read the series, because I love her writing style, and she's actually really interactive on like Twitter. So if you're interested in following a great author on Twitter, I highly recommend checking her out. Next up is also another one that I don't own, and that is The Female of the Species. This is a fairly short book, but it's really good. It's kind of a thriller, mystery, coming of age kind of thing, but I really loved the characters in this, and I loved the main character. It's just a really interesting look. So this girl, she kind of has odd tendencies based on some trauma that has happened in her past, and how she copes with that, and it just turns her into an incredible badass who has some questionable ideas about things, and it's just really fun. I liked it a lot, and I liked all the characters. Next up is a memoir, and that is The Glass Castle. This was also an adaptation this year. It was made into a movie that had Brie Larson and Woody Harrelson in it. This is Jeanette Wall's life experience and growing up with a very, very dysfunctional family that had a lot of abuse in the form of neglect. And it's just, it's very, very raw and honest, but in a way that makes you still appreciate the little things. It's a controversial book, guys. I know the movie was super controversial, but if you have ever been a part or close to a dysfunctional family, you may or may not relate to this. I very much did. It talks a lot about it doesn't even talk about it. It shows that you can have a dysfunctional family and have very, very complicated feelings around someone who causes you a lot of pain, but you still love. It's a little sticky, it's a little tricky, but I thought it was a really good memoir, and I recommend it if you like things like that. My next book was actually a birthday gift from my husband this year, and that is Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. I really love the Shadowhunter series, and Cassandra Clare's writing gets much better as she goes along. Not that it was bad to begin with, but you can just see her grow as an author and a writer, and it's been really fun. So far, this is my favorite series out of all. And before this, The Infernal Devices was actually my favorite series by her, but I'm really, really loving this one, and I can't wait till the next one comes out next year. So if you like Cassandra Clare, if you like her Shadowhunter series, I think you will absolutely love this book. It is the second in a new, I think it's going to be a trilogy, and the first one is Lady Midnight, and I really loved that book as well, but this one is even better in my opinion, so check it out. Next up is another book that I picked up at a library sale, and that is World War Z by Max Brooks. I actually have an entire video up comparing this to the movie adaptation of it. I'll link it up in the cards. But I really loved the format of this book. It is told through interviews. So a journalist goes around post-apocalypse and interviews people's perspectives on how the whole zombie apocalypse started and what happened during it, and it's just really interesting, and the movie's very different from the book, so if you're interested in talking about that, it's chock full of spoilers, so beware, but I'll have that linked for you. If you like zombie stories at all in any way, shape, or form, you're gonna like this one. For number 9 on the list is another comic book, and that is Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. Fiona is the artist and Brian is the writer. This series, man, I have bought so many in the series after this. I got a couple for Christmas. I bought a few more on my own because after reading this first one, I knew I was going to just love the entire series. I think there's 7 or 8 volumes out. This is number 1, obviously, but it is a sci-fi that is about these two characters, and they come from different worlds that are very warring against each other. It's kind of a Romeo and Juliet situation, but the art style is beautiful. The sci-fi elements of it are very interesting, and I really love it so far. If you know of any other comic books that are kind of in the same vein that you really recommend, or just comic books in general, let me know, because I'm very interested in reading more this year. And last but not least, because this is not a ranking video, is It by Stephen King, this massive, massive book. My husband and I read through this book earlier this year before the new movie came out. I had never read this before. I had never seen the miniseries, so we did a whole It project series thing on our other channel, which is movie and TV show and all sorts of media kind of focus. So we did a book review, miniseries review, and the new movie review. So if you're interested in that, I'll link a couple of them. But I loved this book. There's about 8 pages towards the end of it that are atrocious, and I would rip out of every book I could ever find if possible. It's the only thing that kept me from giving this 5 stars, but it's really, really good. If you like Stephen King, if you like horror, highly recommend. So those were my top 10 books of the year. Now let's talk about bottom 10 of the year. Now, not all of these were atrocious books. They were mostly 2 and 3 stars. I don't think I have any 1 stars on here. 1 stars for me usually signify that I DNF'd it, and so therefore I don't include it on lists like this. I only include books that I completely finished reading. So again, this is not in any particular order. It's not ranked from 1 to 10. It's just kind of in the order that I read them. And I don't own any of these, which I guess is a good thing because I didn't like them. So let's get into it. So the first one is Alien Love Story by A.K. Dawson. This was sent to me as an ebook to review, and the premise was really interesting. It's a sci-fi. It's about a boy falling in love with an alien girl. I believe it's kind of a middle grade type thing, but there's some stuff in it that makes me lean more YA. Not sure. But first of all, it's romance. So romances tend not to do well with me. However, it was sci-fi, so I thought, why not? And then it treated the author and the main character, I guess more so, treated the alien love interest as very much an object. And it really, really bothered me, like, throughout the whole thing. Like, there was no substance to their relationship. It was very insta-lovey, and he just wanted her for sex. And that's it. And it was kind of frustrating. So, next up is A Little Princess, which I have talked about in a wrap-up on here somewhere. But I hated this book so much. It was a 2-star, which means I really hated it, but I finished it. This is a classic. I know that there's a beloved movie from like the 90s, I think, on it, and people love it. My husband loves the movie. I've never seen the movie, but this book was just awful. It was boring. It treated characters terribly. Like, it was very racist and very just, I didn't like it. Next up is The Last Star. This is the 3rd book in a series, the 5th Wave series, and I really, really loved the first book. Second book was okay, and the 3rd book was just a really big letdown. For a finale in a series, I was just really bummed by it. I didn't like how it concluded. I thought it was really weak book compared to the rest of the series, especially the very first book. So this one was more on this list because it was just disappointing. Number 4 is a book that I read in anticipation of the movie adaptation coming out, and that is The Mountain Between Us. So this is a kind of romance thriller type thing. So these two random people who have no connection end up getting on a private plane to get out of a like bad weather situation, and then they end up crashing in the wilderness when it is very cold and snowy and people have broken bones, and it's not good, and they survive and things happen. It was romance. It was a mystery thriller type thing. It didn't vibe with me. It was okay. Like, I didn't regret reading it, but I was just like, meh, probably wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Next up is a book that a lot of people really, really like. That is Station 11. I'm not sure if I didn't like this as much because I did it on audiobook, and I just feel like some books are better physically read versus audio. May or may not be the case with this one, but I know several people on like BookTube or just on blogs that I've seen review this absolutely love it. So I don't know, it was really boring to me for like a sci-fi dystopian type thing, and I don't know, I wasn't all that interested. I never connected to any of the characters very strongly, so I didn't really care about what happened to them, so Next was another audiobook, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe I just need to stop reading some of these as audiobooks, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is also a popular one. It's one of those books where you hate every single character in it, and I think you can have good books where you hate all the characters, and I don't think this is a bad book. I just didn't personally enjoy it because I have a lot of trouble enjoying books that I hate all the characters in. I have to root for somebody. I need to latch on to somebody and be like, yes, you're great. And you physically can't do that in this book. I mean, you can like characters, like in the like, oh, they're terrible but interesting, but I didn't like root for any of them. They were just all garbage humans. For number 7 is another romance. This is Confess by Colleen Hoover. I didn't like it for lots of reasons. It was just, Which is funny because I love November 9, which has its problems. I admit it's not the best, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And this one was just not the same, which was a bummer because November 9 was the first Colleen Hoover book I ever read, so I thought I would enjoy more of hers. I think she's going to be a hit or miss author for me if I end up reading any more of her books. I think I have a couple more on my TBR, but yeah. Number 8 is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. I was actually really surprised that I didn't like this because I love Fangirl. Fangirl was excellent. I think I gave it 5 stars last year. And so I was really excited to read Carry On, which, if you're unfamiliar, Fangirl is about a girl who's going off to college, and she runs a fan fiction storyline that basically mimics, it's like Harry Potter, but it's not called Harry Potter, and the storyline's a little different, but it's kind of Harry Potter-ish. So she runs a fan fiction who puts essentially the Harry and Draco main characters as like love interests, which is really interesting. I really like the excerpts from it in Fangirl, but Carry On, I don't know, is kind of lackluster for me, and it's just another one that ended up on this list because it was just kind of disappointing. Wasn't terrible, just disappointing. Number 9, another one that's disappointing because the first one was great, and that is The Lost Kingdom of Baymar. This is the prequel to The Two Princesses of Baymar, which I love and own and have read many, many times. It's kind of a middle grade kind of storyline, but the prequel just didn't have the same charm as the first one, and while it was set in the same world, it was set with completely different characters. There's like one character that crosses over kind of ish, but it's set in a totally different area of the world. It didn't tie in quite as much as I would have liked it to personally, and I just, like I said, it didn't have the same magic as the first book, and it didn't draw me in quite as much with its characters. And ringing in number 10 of my worst books that I read in 2017 is A Stranger in the House. I read this as part of Spookathon, which was the very first, yes, it was the very first readathon I ever participated in. Love, we'll do again next year. But it was just, I didn't have this on my TBR originally because based on its reviews and such, I just decided it wasn't for me. However, for Spookathon, they did a group read, and this was it. And so I will say it was really fun to be part of the like live chat that the girls hosted for that, because we, you know, everybody got to talk about it. You got to hear everybody's opinions and their opinions, and so that part was really fun. The book itself was just boring, in my opinion. As a mystery thriller, like, yeah, there were parts where I was like, ooh, what's happening? And I'm interested. And the plot twist surprised me, but I don't know, at the end of the day, I was just like, that describes a lot of books on this list. Meh. That wraps up my top 10 and bottom 10 books of 2017. So if that is all you were here for, so long. Thank you for watching. Now we are going to get into my bookish stats. So if you are nerdy or like numbers, welcome. This place is for you. So my total read book count for the year was 49 books. My goal for the year, I believe, was 45 or 46, so I did exceed that by a few books. So for how much I read in pages or listening time, so the way I did this is I have a page count and then an audio hour count. The audio hour count, I don't like double dips, so technically I read more than this many pages, but some of them were on audio form, hence why they're not all included. So the total pages I read was 10,803 pages, and then I read 171 hours of audiobook, which I think added up to a little over a week, so a little over 7 days. My child has decided he wants to join by running over here. This is my new cat. I got him in November. If you watched my, I think it was Borrow-a-thon vlog, he was in that. I found him in the midst of that vlog, but this is Mojo. He's very wired right now and wants to play, but he has to deal with me filming, and my husband is off playing video games. Hi. He loves to hang out on this bookshelf underneath it. Anyways, that's enough cameo for now. Back to the stats. So for male versus female authors, I actually read more female than male, which I was very happy about because I didn't really intentionally do that. I read 21 male authors and 28 female authors. I would love to increase the female author count next year, or percentage next year. So 2018 goals video coming at you soon. That might be included. For fiction versus nonfiction, unsurprising to no one, was I read far more fiction. It is what I prefer. I read 43 fiction and 6 nonfiction. The nonfiction included things like memoirs, poetry, essays, that kind of thing. For age range, I read 22 adult and 22 YA, so those were split down the middle. And then I read 5 children's or middle grade books. For the source of my books, like I said earlier in this video, I do get majority of my books from the library, which was reflected in my stats. 30 of my books were from the library, 11 were purchased by me, 6 were gifts given by friends or my husband, and 2 were review copies that were sent to me. For format, I tend to read mostly print, so I read 28 print, 18 audio, and 3 digital, so ebook. 45 of my books were prose, or just regular written word, 3 were comic books, and 1 was a poetry book. I don't tend to read very many new releases, like current year releases, so that was definitely reflected. I read 44 previous to 2017 releases and 4 2017 releases. So for genre, another one that's not surprising, I tend to read majority sci-fi and fantasy. I read 28 sci-fi or fantasies, 7 mystery thrillers, 3 romance, 3 memoirs or biographies, 2 general fiction, 2 classics, 2 general nonfiction, 1 horror, and 1 essays. For star rating distribution, I had mostly 4 stars this year. I had 9 5 stars, 27 4 stars, 11 3 stars, and only 2 2 stars, which is not bad. And there are no 1 stars on this list because, like I said previously, I only 1 star a book if I DNF it, and I don't include it in these types of wrap-ups or stats. That wraps up 2017 reading. If you are interested in the books I read this year in a more detailed look, you can look up my past wrap-ups either on my blog or on YouTube, because I did start YouTube in, I believe, August, so I have a bunch of other ones on my blog. I also have Goodreads, which you can find linked down below, and you can dig into my shelves if you are interested in more details. I hope you had a wonderful 2017 reading year and that your 2018 is even better. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be more books or certain goals, just I hope you read and I hope you enjoy it. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.